Depends. Yeah, if there are questions for them.
8:01, I made it.
You're right on time.
I've been in quite a few exhibitions in Russia, and one of them was yours. Soft pop, bringing it back home. Recently I was in a Felix, maybe you remember.
From another, like, I've never seen a Russian production before.
Yeah. Anyway, you don't talk so much about, or let me tell a story. I was recently wrapping in a couple of shows organized by the NCCA in Ekaterinburg, Samara, Moscow, and there was a conference with Victor Messiano from them, and it was very interesting to see that this organization had been put under a head which was military. So you can imagine maybe the curator of the Western kind, which was critical art, in the sense of many curators, because this organization is all in Russia, being run by somebody who has military intentions put their back into. So I mean, the entire notion was how you deal with maybe what Timothy Garton Ash would call psychotic. He says somewhere, nations can be like people psychotic. You know, how do we haven't really talked about what it means to work in a society that is so complex. I mean, what is the status of your institution in that game? You kind of a little bit touched it, but I guess this is a very complex story.
Yeah, complex and not complex. I mean, NCCA is a fascinating story because the National Centre for Contemporary Art actually is the closest thing to a contemporary networked organisation. I think it's genius in the way that it was set up. It relates very much back to the Museum of Community Culture and the early museums of the Revolution, or the idea for these museums of the Revolution, because it was dispersed across the country. It's like just as the collections were at that time. So this idea goes back to there, and it is in the last, I think, 2 years that basically the government, because it's a national, it's not federal, but it is regarded as a national institution because it exists in different places. And so it was merged with Rosiso, and Rosiso is part of basically a very strong governmental structure that holds a whole load of work that none of us have ever seen. It's like in its, and it's also involved in the international exchanges and how this all works, and somehow connected to like Ministry of Defence because they're all connected in the end. And so there's a huge number of problems that honestly Garage doesn't experience. If you speak to Alyssa or like a number of the people that are, they now have a boss basically that has nothing to do with art. If you speak to the people working in the institution, lots of things have caved in different places. In Vladivostok there was supposed to be a space, but now they have to move because the government's given them another one. You don't have any of those problems.
Because they're private, or?
Because it's private. There's another organisation called VAC, Victoria Art Foundation, that is about to open next year, and they're building this giant building. And so there is an independence. That's why I was bringing it into this kind of new institutional structures, because somehow, and it's not because, I mean, everybody would love to put Roman Abramovich in bed with Putin, and I guess like anybody with a lot of money is in bed with, but on a daily basis, it's not how it works. And so there is an independence. Basically, we have to collaborate, like this distance from the building to what is owned by the city. So anything we do in the square or in the park, we collaborate on that. Anything we do in the building, we've had the FSB come once, and it was around an exhibition that called Young Turks, and it was working with Kogan Ergen from Istanbul, and it basically opened the day that the second Russian fighter plane went into Turkish airspace. And because the show is called Young Turks, the FSB came and then basically said it's nothing to do with it. So we can show Pussy Riot, we can show, like, we funded Pavel Pavlensky's like film of him nailing his balls to Red Square. That's all possible because what we're not doing is saying, look, we're doing this, we're doing it and like, fuck you all, we're doing it. You know, just like we're doing it as part of a whole load of different programming, also working with Louise Bourgeois, working with, and so it's basically, it doesn't get censored. It's not something. I did also discover that it's illegal to censor in Russia.
It's illegal?
Illegal. There are no censorship laws in Russia. It's fascinating because we brought in Bevin Perabon, and there were 15 works that were censored when we were applying to bring the work in through customs. And so the curator went back and said, you cannot censor the work. And so we went to WAZISO, which is this organisation that you have to go through to get work in internationally. And there's a couple of routes, but that's the main legal route in terms of going to the government. And
so is it the custom that censors the work?
It's the people in charge of deciding what, in WAZISO, deciding what they think is going to be okay to bring in or out. And it's usually not people at the top, because if you go to the top and you say this is what's happening, and it's not legal to do this, the only works that we couldn't show were ones with swastikas, and ones where like children being like abused basically. So there were 3 works that we couldn't show, because you can remove works with swastikas and with child porn. So all the others came and were shown. You have to put an 18 plus. Like, so you have to say what it is when you, like, so if there's a room with the porn stuff or anything like that, then you put 18 plus. But otherwise, so it's a very weird. There's so many different crevices and avenues and like ways in which people use information for different. So I mean, we're not experiencing it. So I mean, many people say it's because we're under protection. I mean, I can't say it. It's not like we're given any special, there's a lot of money that's spent.
Anyone else? Who should we turn this into a...
I mean, there's a number of
Yeah, of course. Just showing patience.
I'm happy to talk about anything.
Maybe because I think I didn't really understand your question, but maybe more the answer, but mine was similar, but maybe to push it a little bit more, like if you have the chance to do certain things as an institution, I don't know, you were mentioning gay rights, you were mentioning different things, could you also push it further, because your slide also, it also ends your presentation with what could be like a museum 21st century in all these countries. So would it also be possible to just push the limits of what you can do? Because other people in Russia probably can't, like activists or other, like maybe young radical artists or whatever. So maybe what is the potential of your position? Also maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe also you as the only one who is non-Russian in the crew?
So in terms of pushing things, like it's going back to like providing a kind of space for discussion. Basically, we haven't said no to anything, and so there's a like Nikita Kadan, for example, from Ukraine, has used Garage as a way to protest some of the artists that have been imprisoned, the filmmakers and the theatre directors that have been imprisoned in Russia, in the museum as part of conferences. There's a number of different ways in which platforms are provided. When it comes to, so if people ask, then it's usually possible to work it out within the framework of what we're doing. When it came to the triennial, for example, there's a number of like one of the biggest sections of that is around activism, because there are so many artists that are basically activists first, artists second. It's like especially around like women's rights and gay rights. What's interesting is that took place in the museum, and then there's this huge discussion. There are some people that wouldn't participate in the triennial because they don't want to be institutionalized, and I totally agree with that. It's just like there has to be a way in which, because as soon as there's this big question, if it's shown in garage, I mean, what are you doing? You're like, because any institution, just to call it institution, it's like, are they being coerced? Like, are we adopting what it is that they're trying to fight? Can we add to their voice, as many curators want to do? Or are we actually watering down their voice because they're now part of this, this other thing that is like almost kind of, like if we support it, then what, is it dead? So there's that whole question. Like Pavel Pavensky, for example, is happy to have Garage support him, but at the same time, he would never want to, like the name Garage isn't on what he's doing, but he's happy to get the support. So people want it in different ways. I think it's very important that there are things that don't get eaten up by Garage, and that they're maintained. There is a possibility, because whilst it's an independent institution with an independent voice, it's currently at a scale where it's like there needs to be other things that can happen around it. You can't kill off ecology, like the potential for ecology. So when it comes to me, what's interesting is that I went bowling in there with the whole kind of like gay rights, like wanting to create these forums, and the ways that I wanted to do it, I was shut down super fast. So just like, It's like, we don't do it your way. It's not something, you can't just import from New York, like some of the discussions and the way that it's working. It's not the way we want to talk about it. It's not the way that we want it to be. It's just like, so it's kind of, it's like, so I can say something that can create a whole, but I can't fill the hole with the way that between community who are like 20 years younger than me and like experiencing something completely different. So what it is that I've experienced like, within my community. And so it's very important to kind of let that happen in a way, just as, it's an interesting conundrum. Because like sometimes we're just like, but you can be so much more aggressive about this, you can say so much more, and they don't want to. They want to say it in their way. So like my idea of aggressive is different to their idea of like how you penetrate something, how you like create like some kind of fissure between like what's the norm and what they want to have like said. So yeah, I've had to make sure that I don't start to like stamp my opinions on things.
Okay, nothing else?
Okay. Just to add something maybe. Self-censorship is very, let's say, the last stage of death, maybe, of free opinion or free thinking. Do they think that they don't want to, or that they cannot? Because this is also very important in that context, and I was lucky enough to be there. It's very hard not to want to, somehow, because it's, you have this sense of something somewhere controlling everything, and it's hard to understand people that don't want to, or they're completely giving into a context, because yes, a museum, but a difficult context, also how museums function in such a context, I think should be the question, or whether museums can have any role in this particular context. That's the question, for myself. It's like, what can a museum do in such a context? I mean, it's sometimes maybe it's not too much to ask, but it's too naive to expect that a museum can do a lot in that particular context or another. Let's say a museum in occupied territory. What purpose does it serve? And this also maybe is something that you probably thought a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I haven't even go as far as accusing people of self-censorship. And then they're like, who are you to accuse me of self-censorship? Like, so you've decided what censorship is now. And it's like, you know, it's like if we want to like discuss things in this way. I mean, I was talking LGBT like 5 years ago and trying to create a couple of exhibitions. It's like we don't want to do an exhibition. It's like we want reading groups, we want discussions, we want to be able to do things. It's like we don't want it at the, like why do an exhibition about LGBT? LGBT doesn't even exist with that terminology in Russia. And it's like, and I'm just like, yeah, but you've been talking to me about these ideas and how this is applied. It's just like, you know, and they're like, yeah, we don't want to do it that way. And I'm like, but is that self-censorship? And I'm just like, fuck off, basically. It's just like, what, you're now telling us that we're censoring ourselves? It's like, so it's very interesting. It's like, because I don't think I could be the person to answer that, because if you like, I'm the aggressor by trying to get things done in a certain way that aren't necessarily right. So it's like, I mean, ultimately there has to be the space for people to decide how they want to do it, and then it turns up in the strangest of ways.
Just a super stupid question. How did you end up in all these super delicate, complicated
By red stripes, then.
political stories?
Let's keep this for another occasion. Thank you very much, Kate. Five-minute break.